Sarah Chun stood on the metal platform outside her office, watching the morning sun rise over the strange landscape of Kepler 442b. The red grass moved in waves across the valley, and the purple mountains stood tall against the orange sky. She had been living on this alien world for 3 years now, but it still felt like a dream sometimes. The sound of clicking feet made her turn around. A small creature with 4 arms and shiny black skin walked toward her. Its big green eyes looked up at her with trust and love. This was Kira, her adopted daughter. Kira was not human. She was a Zephyrian, one of the bug-like aliens who had lived on this planet for thousands of years. "Good morning, little one," Sarah said, kneeling down to hug Kira. The young Zephyrian made soft chirping sounds that meant she was happy. Sarah had learned to understand many Zephyrian sounds over the past 2 years, ever since she had found Kira trapped under rocks in a mining accident. Sarah remembered that day clearly. She had been checking the mining sites when she heard crying from under a pile of fallen rocks. Most humans would have called for Zephyrian help and waited, but Sarah could not listen to a child cry without helping. She had dug through the rocks with her bare hands until she found a tiny Zephyrian larva, hurt and scared. The Zephyrian workers had been shocked when Sarah pulled Kira from the rocks. They said humans should not touch their young, but Kira had been badly hurt, and her parents had died in the accident. Sarah took her to the human medical center and refused to leave her side. That decision had caused many problems. The Zephyrians had a strict way of doing things. They lived in groups called hives, and everyone had their place. They did not understand why a human would care for a Zephyrian child. Some of them thought it was wrong. But Queen Vexthara, the ruler of all Zephyrians on the planet, had allowed it. She said Sarah could keep Kira as long as she continued to do her job well. Sarah was the person who helped humans and Zephyrians work together. She made sure both groups got what they needed and solved problems when they argued. Now, Sarah watched Kira play with a small metal toy. The young Zephyrian was growing fast. Her black skin was getting harder, and her arms were getting stronger. Soon she would enter the next stage of her life, when her body would change completely. Sarah knew this time was important for Zephyrians, but she also knew it might bring new dangers. "Sarah," a voice called from behind them. She turned to see Lieutenant Torres running toward them. He looked worried. Torres was a good soldier who helped Sarah keep peace between the humans and Zephyrians. "What is wrong?" Sarah asked. "We have a problem," Torres said, breathing hard. The long-range sensors picked up something. "A big fleet of ships is coming toward our system. They will be here in 2 days." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "How big?" "At least 50 ships. Maybe more." "They are not friendly ships, Sarah. The computer says they are Void Reapers." Sarah had heard stories about the Void Reapers. They were pirates and slavers who traveled from planet to planet, taking everything valuable. They stole people to sell as slaves and destroyed anything they could not take. Many worlds had fallen to them. "Have you told the Zephyrians?" Sarah asked. "Yes, Queen Vexthara is calling a meeting of her council right now. She wants you there." Sarah looked down at Kira, who was still playing with her toy. The little Zephyrian did not understand what was happening, but she could sense that something was wrong. Her green eyes looked up at Sarah with worry. "Torres, take Kira to the safe room in the human compound. Make sure she has food and water. Do not let her leave until I come back. But Sarah, do it," Sarah said firmly. She knelt down and hugged Kira tightly. "Be good for Torres, little one. I will be back soon." Kira made worried clicking sounds, but she went with Torres. Sarah watched them walk away, then headed toward the Zephyrian Hive City. The Hive City was a huge structure that looked like it was made of black glass and metal. It rose high into the sky, with tunnels and chambers going deep underground. Thousands of Zephyrians lived and worked inside it. Sarah had been inside many times, but it still amazed her. The Zephyrian guards let her pass without question. They knew she was important to their queen. Sarah walked through the curved halls until she reached the council chamber. The room was full of Zephyrian officials, all talking in their clicking language. Queen Vexthara sat on a high throne made of the same black material as the walls. She was much larger than other Zephyrians, with 6 arms instead of 4 and a crown of sharp spines on her head. Her eyes were deeper and older than any human eyes Sarah had ever seen. "Captain Chun," the queen said in perfect human language, "you have heard about the approaching fleet." "Yes, your majesty." "What do our defenses look like?" The queen's head moved slightly, which Sarah knew meant she was not happy. "Not good. The Void Reapers have strong weapons and many ships. Our own fleet can fight them, but we might lose." One of the council members, a thin Zephyrian named Zixtal, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we should prepare the deep shelters. If we cannot win, we must protect our people." "What about the human settlements?" Sarah asked. "There are 5,000 humans living in the outer colonies. They cannot reach the deep shelters in time." Zixtal made a dismissive sound. "The humans chose to live outside the protection of the hive. That is their problem." Sarah felt anger rise in her chest. "Those humans work to help your people. They mine the metals you need and grow food for trade. You cannot just leave them to die." "Captain Chun," the queen said quietly, "Zixtal speaks correctly about our laws. In times of great danger, the hive must protect itself first." Sarah looked around the room at all the Zephyrian faces. She had worked with these beings for 3 years. She had helped solve their problems and made peace when humans and Zephyrians disagreed. But now they were willing to let thousands of humans die to save themselves. "What about Kira?" Sarah asked. "She lives in the human settlement." The queen was quiet for a long moment. "Bring the child here. She will be safe in the hive. And the other humans? We will do what we can," the queen said. But Sarah could hear in her voice that it would not be much thought as Sarah left the hive city. Her mind was already working on a plan. She could not save everyone, but she would not let the Void Reapers take her people without a fight. And she would never let them touch Kira. The Void Reaper ships dropped out of space like black storms against the orange sky. Sarah Chun watched from her command center as 50 massive vessels moved into orbit around Kepler-4 42b. Each ship was bigger than the entire human settlement, covered in weapons that could turn a city into ash in minutes. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked Taurus, who was watching the sensor readings. "They are sending landing ships now. First wave will hit the outer settlements in 4 hours, maybe less." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing all the human colonies spread across the planet. 20,000 people lived in these settlements, farming and mining to support both human and Zephyrian communities. Most of them had no weapons and no way to fight back against professional raiders. "Captain," said Dr. Martinez, the settlement's chief medical officer, "we are getting reports from the deep space monitoring stations. The Void Reapers are not just here for supplies. They have slave ships with them, bioscanners. They are looking for something specific." Sarah felt cold fear in her chest. "What kind of something?" "Young Zephyrians. Ones who are about to change into their adult forms. The neural patterns during that change are worth a fortune on the black market. Slavers use them to make drugs that enhance psychic abilities." Kira, Sarah's adopted daughter, was exactly the right age for that kind of targeting. The young Zephyrian was in the safe room right now, probably scared and confused about why everyone was acting strange. "Have you told Queen Vexthara?" Sarah asked. "Yes, she is moving all young Zephyrians into the deep hive chambers. They will be protected by the strongest shields and weapons on the planet." "What about evacuation for the human settlements?" Torres shook his head. The Queen's Council voted. They will not risk Zephyrian ships to evacuate humans. They say the hive must be protected first. Sarah stared at the tactical display. The Zephyrian hive city sat in the center of the continent, surrounded by mountains and protected by powerful energy shields. It would take the Void Reapers days to break through those defenses, if they could do it at all. But the human settlements were scattered across the open plains and valleys. They had no shields, no heavy weapons, no place to hide. The Void Reapers would sweep through them like a fire through dry grass. "Ma'am," said communications specialist Webb, "I am getting emergency signals from the outer settlements. The raiders are demanding that we surrender all young Zephyrians and half our population for slavery. If we refuse, they will destroy everything." Sarah closed her eyes and thought. The Void Reapers always gave these choices. Surrender and lose some people, or resist and lose everyone. Most colonies chose to surrender because they thought it was the only way to save lives. But Sarah had fought pirates before, back when she served in Earth's military. She knew the truth about the Void Reapers. They never kept their promises. Even if the colonies surrendered, the raiders would take everything and kill anyone who might cause trouble later. Webb, open a channel to all human settlements. Emergency frequency. Channel open, ma'am. This is Captain Chun to all colony leaders. Do not surrender to the Void Reapers. I repeat, do not surrender. We are going to fight back. Sarah, Torres said quietly, we cannot fight them. They have too many ships and too many soldiers. We cannot fight them in space, Sarah agreed. But we can fight them on the ground. And we can make them pay a price so high that they decide to leave. Sarah turned to Dr. Martinez. How long would it take to evacuate the outer settlements? To the inner colonies? By ground transport? At least 12 hours. Maybe more. We do not have 12 hours. Sarah looked at the map again, studying the geography of their continent. All the human settlements were connected by roads that ran through valleys and mountain passes. There was only one main route, from the outer colonies to the inner areas where people could find shelter. That route went through Whispering Canyon. The canyon was a narrow pass between two tall mountains. The road wound through it for 10 kilometers, with steep rock walls on both sides. It was the only way for large numbers of vehicles to travel quickly between the outer and inner settlements. Torres, what kind of mining equipment do we have in storage? Standard stuff. Excavation charges, drilling equipment, some heavy explosives for breaking up rock. Why? Sarah pointed to Whispering Canyon on the map. If we could collapse this canyon while the Void Reaper ground forces are moving through it, we could trap them. Maybe even destroy their main attack force. Torres stared at her. That would take precise timing. Someone would need to be on site to trigger the charges manually. And that someone would not survive the explosion. I know. Sarah, you cannot. I can and I will. Sarah stood up and began giving orders. Torres, get me every piece of explosive we have in storage. I want it all loaded into transport vehicles and moved to Whispering Canyon. Martinez, start organizing the evacuation. Use every vehicle we have to move people toward the inner settlements. What about Kira? Torres asked. Sarah felt her heart twist. Take her to Queen Vextara. Tell the Queen that I am giving my daughter into her personal protection. Make sure she understands that Kira is not just any child. She is my child, and I am dying to protect her. Torres looked like he wanted to argue more, but he could see the determination in Sarah's eyes. Yes, ma'am. As the command center filled with activity, Sarah walked to the window and looked out at the settlement. Children were playing in the streets, not understanding the danger that was coming. Adults hurried back and forth, preparing for evacuation. She thought about Kira, safe in the protective chamber, but probably scared and confused. The little Zephyrian had already lost her birth parents. Now she would lose her adopted mother too. But Sarah had made her choice. She had always known that being a leader meant making hard decisions. Sometimes it meant sacrificing everything to protect the people you cared about. "Ma'am," Webb called out, "I am getting reports from the outer settlements. Void Reaper landing ships are touching down. They are demanding immediate surrender. Tell them to evacuate immediately. All vehicles, all people, heading for the inner colonies through Whispering Canyon. They have 6 hours to get through before I blow it up." Sarah walked to her personal quarters and began putting on her combat gear. She had not worn military armor in 3 years, but it still felt familiar. The weight of the weapons, the protection of the plates, the helmet that would record her final moments. She picked up a small holographic projector that contained pictures of Kira, the young Zephyrian laughing, playing, sleeping peacefully in her bed. Sarah had been recording these moments for 2 years, knowing that someday Kira might want to remember her childhood. "I love you, little one," Sarah whispered to the images. "I hope you understand that everything I do is to keep you safe." Outside, the first explosions began as Void Reaper ships started their attack on the outer settlements. The war for Kepler 442b had begun, and Sarah Chun was about to make a decision that would change everything. The convoy of vehicles moved through Whispering Canyon like a river of metal and glass. Sarah Chun watched from her position high on the canyon wall as thousands of human colonists fled toward safety. Families packed into cargo trucks, medical vehicles carrying the injured, and farming equipment loaded with supplies rolled past below. Sarah checked her equipment one more time. Explosive charges were placed at 12 key points along the canyon walls. Each charge was powerful enough to bring down tons of rock. When they all exploded together, they would seal the canyon completely and crush everything inside. She had 6 volunteers with her. 3 humans and 3 Zephyrians who had refused to abandon the evacuation. They crouched behind rocks along the canyon rim, watching for the enemy. "Captain," whispered Sergeant Kim, a former Earth military engineer. "Last group of civilians just passed through, but the Void Reapers are only 10 minutes behind them." Sarah nodded. "Remember the plan. We let them get deep into the canyon. Then we trigger the charges. Anyone who wants to leave now can go. This is a one-way mission." Nobody moved. The volunteers had all known what they were signing up for when they came here. Movement on the horizon, called HFY, a young Zephyrian scout. His enhanced eyes could see much further than human ones. Many vehicles. Very fast. Sarah raised her binoculars and looked toward the canyon entrance. A cloud of dust was rising in the distance, getting bigger every second. The Void Reapers were coming in ground assault vehicles designed to chase down fleeing civilians. "How many?" she asked. "I count 40 vehicles. Maybe more behind them. Looks like their main ground force." "Perfect." If Sarah could destroy this group, the remaining Void Reapers would have to land more troops from their ships. That would take time and give the civilians a chance to reach safety. The first enemy vehicles appeared at the canyon entrance. They were ugly machines covered in armor and weapons, built for war instead of exploration. Sarah could see Void Reaper soldiers hanging from the sides, eager to catch up with the fleeing humans. "Wait," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Let them come deeper." The enemy convoy entered the canyon and began moving through the narrow road. Their vehicles kicked up clouds of dust that made it hard to see. Sarah counted 20 vehicles, then 30, then 40. Still they came, following the trail left by the human evacuation. "Captain," Kim said nervously, "if we wait too long, some of them might make it through. Just a little longer." Sarah watched as more vehicles entered the canyon. These were bigger ones, probably carrying the commanders and heavy weapons. If she could trap these, the Void Reapers would lose their leadership and their best equipment. Suddenly, weapons fire erupted from the canyon floor. The Void Reapers were shooting at something ahead of them. Sarah grabbed her binoculars and saw what they were targeting. A single human transport truck sat, broken down, in the middle of the road. Smoke poured from its engine, and Sarah could see people hiding behind it. Civilians who had not made it out in time. No, Sarah breathed. The plan required the enemy to be deeper in the canyon before she triggered the explosion. But those people would be killed if she waited. Kim, can you see who is down there? It looks like the Peterson family, and maybe some others. I count 6 or 7 people. Sarah closed her eyes. The Peterson family had 2 young children. She had watched them play with Kira many times. They were good people who had worked hard to build a life on this alien world. She could stick to the plan and let them die, which would give her the best chance of destroying the enemy force. Or she could save them and risk letting some Void Reapers escape. It was not really a choice at all. Everyone, open fire! Cover those civilians. Sarah and her volunteers began shooting at the enemy vehicles from above. Their weapons were not powerful enough to destroy the armored machines, but they could distract the soldiers and give the civilians time to run. Peterson! Sarah shouted into her radio. This is Captain Chun. Take your people and run toward the canyon exit. We will cover you. The hidden civilians jumped up and began running back the way they had come. The Void Reapers turned their attention to the canyon walls, trying to find where the shots were coming from. Enemy soldiers poured out of their vehicles and began climbing the steep rock walls. They moved fast and carried heavy weapons. Sarah knew her small team could not hold them off for long. Kim, HFY, fall back to position 3. Keep them busy for as long as you can. Sarah stayed at the main detonation point, watching the enemy convoy spread out through the canyon. She had lost the perfect opportunity to trap them all, but she had saved the civilian family. That was worth something. Captain, HFY called over the radio. More vehicles coming. They are bringing flying machines. Sarah looked up and saw a small aircraft rising from the rear of the enemy convoy. Void Reaper attack flyers, designed to hunt down targets in rough terrain. If those machines got out of the canyon, they could catch the fleeing civilians easily. All positions, this is Chun. I am triggering the charges in 30 seconds. Anyone who can get clear, do it now. Sarah, wait! Kim shouted. You can use the remote detonator. You do not have to stay here. Sarah looked at the device in her hands. Kim was right. She could trigger the explosion from a distance and try to escape. But the remote detonator was not reliable at long range. If it failed, the enemy would escape and catch the civilians. She thought about Kira, safe in the Zephyrian hive. The little alien girl who had called her Mama in her own clicking language. The child who trusted her to keep the world safe. Tell Kira I love her, Sarah said into the radio. She pressed the detonation button. The canyon exploded like thunder from the gods. 12 massive charges went off at the same time, sending millions of tons of rock crashing down into the narrow pass. The sound was so loud that Sarah felt it in her bones, even as the shock wave threw her against the canyon wall. Enemy vehicles disappeared under avalanches of stone. The flying machines were crushed before they could gain altitude. In 30 seconds, the most dangerous part of the Void Reaper force was completely destroyed, but Sarah had been too close to the explosion. Rocks fell around her like rain, and she could not move fast enough to dodge them all. A boulder the size of a house struck her and pinned her against the ground. She felt her ribs crack and tasted blood in her mouth. As dust settled over the canyon, Sarah lay trapped under the rock. She could not feel her legs anymore, and breathing was getting harder. Her radio was broken, and her weapons were scattered out of reach. But she could see through the dust cloud that the canyon was completely blocked. No vehicles could get through. The civilians were safe. Kira was safe, Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her adopted daughter. She hoped someone would explain to the little Zephyrian why her human mother had not come home. She hoped Kira would understand that love sometimes meant making the hardest choice of all. The sun was setting over the alien mountains when Sarah Chen finally let the darkness take her. Queen Vexthara had never left her hive city during a time of war. For 3,000 years, no Zephyrian ruler had personally traveled to a battlefield. It was against every law and tradition of her people. But when the reports came in about what had happened at Whispering Canyon, the queen did something that shocked her entire court. She ordered her personal aircraft prepared and flew directly to the destroyed pass. The canyon was a scene of total destruction. Millions of tons of rock had fallen into the narrow space, creating a wall of stone 200 meters high. No enemy vehicles had escaped. The sacrifice of Captain Sarah Chun had saved thousands of lives. The queen walked among the rocks, her 6 arms moving gracefully as she climbed over the debris. Behind her came her personal guard and several Zephyrian rescue specialists with scanning equipment. "Your Majesty," said Commander Tixful, the head of her guard, "this is too dangerous. If there are still enemies in the area—" "There are no enemies here," the queen said quietly. "They are all dead. But there is something else. Someone else." The queen had felt it as soon as her aircraft approached the canyon. A faint presence in her mind, a consciousness that flickered like a dying flame. It was not a Zephyrian mind. It was something else entirely. Something that had touched her thoughts briefly 2 years ago when Captain Chun had first brought young Kira to the hive. "My queen," called one of the rescue specialists. "I am detecting a life sign under the rocks. Very weak, but definitely alive." The queen moved toward the signal, her enhanced senses guiding her through the rubble. She could feel the presence getting stronger as she got closer. And there was something else. Another mind nearby, young and frightened and filled with grief. Kira. The young Zephyrian had escaped from her guards in the hive and somehow made her way to the canyon. She sat beside a pile of rocks, making the low keening sound that Zephyrians made when they mourned the dead. Her small hands were bloody from trying to dig through the stones. "Child," the queen said gently, kneeling beside Kira, "what are you doing here?" "She is under there," Kira said in the clicking language of her people. "My mama is under there and she is hurt. I can feel her, but I cannot reach her." The queen was surprised. Kira was too young to have developed psychic abilities. But the bond between her and Sarah Chun must have been so strong that it created a connection even across species lines. "Can you show me exactly where?" the queen asked. Kira placed her small hand on a specific spot in the rubble. "Here, she is right here." The queen called for her rescue teams to begin digging. They used advanced Zephyrian technology to move the rocks carefully, making sure not to cause more damage to whoever was trapped below. It took 4 hours to reach Sarah Chun. When they finally pulled her from the rubble, she was barely alive. Her body was crushed, her breathing was almost stopped, and her life force was fading fast. "Medical assessment," the queen ordered. The Zephyrian doctor scanned Sarah with his instruments and made worried clicking sounds. "Your Majesty, this human is dying. Massive internal injuries, brain trauma, complete organ failure. Even our best medical technology cannot save her." The queen stared down at the broken woman who had sacrificed everything to save her people. Sarah Chun had earned something that no human had ever received: the complete respect of a Zephyrian ruler. "There is one way," the queen said slowly. Her guards and doctors stared at her in shock. They all knew what she was thinking, and they all knew it was impossible. "Your Majesty," Commander Tixville said carefully, "the debt of chitin has not been invoked in over 1,000 years, and it has never been used on a non-Zephyrian. The debt of chitin was an ancient law that allowed a Zephyrian queen to share her life force with someone who had proven invaluable to the hive. It was dangerous and painful, requiring the queen to give up part of her own essence to save another being. She saved thousands of our people, along with her own, the queen said. She protected children of both species. She earned this right. But, Your Majesty, we do not know if the process will work on a human. The biological differences might kill you both. The queen looked down at Kira, who was holding Sarah's hand and crying. The young Zephyrian had already lost her birth parents. If Sarah died, she would lose her adoptive mother too. That kind of pain might break her mind permanently. Prepare the life-sharing chamber, the queen ordered. My queen, do it now. The medical team worked quickly to stabilize Sarah for transport. They loaded her onto a flying stretcher and rushed her back to the Hive City. The queen flew beside them, her mind already preparing for the most dangerous thing she had ever attempted. The life-sharing chamber was deep in the heart of the hive, in a place where only queens were allowed to go. It was a room filled with organic technology that could manipulate the very essence of life itself. Sarah was placed on a biobed that connected to her nervous system through microscopic filaments. The queen lay on a matching bed beside her, and the two beds were linked by cables that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. The process will take 12 hours, the lead technician explained. Your Majesty will need to maintain constant mental contact with the subject during that time. Any break in concentration could kill you both. The queen nodded and closed her eyes. She felt the machines connect to her mind, and suddenly she was inside Sarah Chun's dying consciousness. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Human thoughts were chaotic and emotional, driven by feelings instead of logic. But underneath the chaos, the queen found something beautiful, pure love for an adopted child, willingness to sacrifice everything for others, and strength that came from choosing to do the right thing even when it hurt. As the queen shared her life force with Sarah, she began to understand what it meant to be human. She felt individual identity instead of group consciousness. She experienced emotions as powerful forces instead of minor distractions. She learned what it was like to make choices based on personal values instead of hive obligations. The process was agony for both of them. The queen's essence was being stretched between two bodies, two minds, two completely different ways of existing. Several times she almost lost control and broke the connection, but each time she wavered. She thought about young Kira waiting outside the chamber, hoping for her mama to come back. That image gave the queen the strength to continue. 12 hours later, Sarah Chen opened her eyes. Her body was changed, stronger, more resilient, with new neural pathways that connected her mind to the Zephyrian hive network. She was still human, but she was also something more. Queen Vexthara collapsed from exhaustion, but she was alive. The sharing had changed her too. For the first time in her long life, she understood what it meant to love someone as an individual rather than as part of a group. Kira, Sarah whispered, her voice weak but clear. The young Zephyrian rushed into the chamber and threw herself into Sarah's arms. Mama, I knew you would come back. I knew it. The queen watched them embrace and felt something she had never experienced before. Happiness for another being's joy. The life-sharing had not only saved Sarah Chun, it had awakened something new in the Zephyrian ruler's ancient heart. 6 months after the battle at Whispering Canyon, Sarah Chun stood in the rebuilt colony square, watching human and Zephyrian children play together under the afternoon sun. It was a sight that would have been impossible before her sacrifice and resurrection, but now it happened every day. The changes in Sarah's body were still strange to her. She was stronger than any normal human, able to lift heavy objects that would have required machinery before. Her reflexes were faster. Her healing was quicker, and most surprisingly, she could sense the emotions and thoughts of nearby Zephyrians through a weak connection to their hive network. But the most important change was not in her body. It was in the way both species now looked at each other. "Mama, look what I made." Kira came running toward her, holding a small sculpture made from colored clay. The young Zephyrian had grown during the past months, her black skin becoming shinier and her 4 arms getting stronger. "It is beautiful, little one," Sarah said, kneeling down to examine the artwork. The sculpture showed a human and a Zephyrian standing together, their hands and claws interlinked. "It is me and you," Kira explained proudly. "Teacher says I should make art about my family." Sarah smiled and hugged her daughter. Kira was attending a new school that had been built for both human and Zephyrian children. Learning together, playing together, growing up as friends instead of strangers. Sarah. A familiar voice made her turn around. Queen Vexthara approached across the square, moving with the grace that all Zephyrian royalty possessed. But there was something different about her now, something warmer in her ancient eyes. "Your Majesty," Sarah said, standing and giving the traditional bow of respect. "Please, just Vexthara," the Queen said. "We have shared too much for such formality." The life-sharing process had created a permanent bond between them. Sarah could sense the Queen's emotions, and Vexthara could feel Sarah's thoughts when they were close together. It was not uncomfortable, but it was strange, like having a distant friend always in the back of your mind. "How are the integration projects going?" Sarah asked. "Better than I hoped. The joint mining operation is producing 30% more ore than either species could manage alone. The agricultural exchanges are feeding more people with less waste. And the research teams are making discoveries that neither group could have achieved separately." Sarah nodded. After the Void Reaper attack, both species had realized that they were stronger together than apart. Humans brought innovation, adaptability, and individual initiative. Zephyrians contributed advanced technology, precise coordination, and collective wisdom. "The Council wants to name you as the first official bridge walker," Vexthara continued. "A permanent position representing both species in all major decisions. I am honored, but I think there is someone else who deserves that title more." Sarah looked over at Kira, who was now playing with 3 human children and 2 young Zephyrians. They were building something together, combining human creativity with Zephyrian precision. Whatever they were making, it was more complex and beautiful than any of them could have built alone. "She is the future," Sarah said. "Born Zephyrian, raised human, accepted by both. When she grows up, she will understand things that neither of us can imagine." Vexthara followed Sarah's gaze and watched the children play. The Queen's expression showed the same mixture of hope and wonder that Sarah felt. "You are right. But that future is still many years away. Until then, we need someone to help both species learn to work together. Someone who has earned the trust of everyone." Before Sarah could respond, Lieutenant Torres came running toward them. He looked excited but also concerned. "Sarah, Your Majesty, you need to see this. We just received a long-range communication from Earth." They followed Torres to the communications center, where the main screen showed a message from Earth's government. Sarah read it quickly, her enhanced mind processing the information faster than she could have before her transformation. "They want to send a diplomatic mission," she said. 5,000 people, including scientists, engineers, and cultural specialists. "That is good news," Vexthara said. "We can use more skilled workers." "There is more," Torres said grimly. "Intelligence reports say other human colony worlds have heard about our alliance with the Zephyrians. Some of them are worried. They think we might be losing our humanity." Sarah felt a familiar anger rise in her chest. She had given her life to protect both species, and now some humans thought she had betrayed her own kind by working with aliens. "Let them come," Vexthara said quietly. "Let them see what we have built here. Let them meet your daughter and the other children who play together without fear or hatred. And if they still do not understand, Sarah asked, then we will show them what happened to the Void Reapers when they threatened our world. Sarah smiled at that. Word of the battle at Whispering Canyon had spread throughout the galaxy. Pirates and raiders now avoided the Kepler system entirely, knowing that humans and Zephyrians would fight together against any threat. Mama, Kira called from across the room. Come see what we built. The children had constructed an elaborate model city using blocks and clay. It had both human-style buildings and Zephyrian-style hives, connected by bridges and surrounded by gardens that could feed both species. What is it? Sarah asked. It is our home, said Emma, one of the human children. The way it could be when we grow up. A place where everyone belongs, added Tigstall, a young Zephyrian who had learned to speak perfect human language. Sarah looked at their creation and saw something amazing. The children had not just built a city. They had designed a symbol of everything their two species could achieve together. Different but equal. Separate but connected. Stronger as a team than they could ever be alone. Your Majesty, Sarah said to Vexthara, I accept the position of Bridge Walker, but I want to make one change to the job description. What change? I do not want to work alone. I want Kira to be my assistant, learning everything she needs to know to take over when she's old enough. And I want every major decision to include input from the next generation. They are the ones who will inherit whatever world we build. Vexthara considered this for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. Let the children help guide us toward their future. As the sun set over the colony, Sarah stood with her adopted daughter and watched the first evening stars appear in the alien sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Earth's diplomatic mission would arrive soon, and Sarah would need to prove that humans and aliens could work together without losing what made each species special. But tonight, she was just a mother watching her child play with friends. Kira was growing up in a world where differences were celebrated instead of feared, where cooperation was stronger than conflict, and where love could cross any boundary. Sarah had died to protect that world. Vexthara had sacrificed her own life force to preserve it.